Dijonai Carrington is on the brink of being dropped by Reebok. And let me tell you what, man, this is not good for Dijonai Carrington at all. And then you have this going on as well. Thousands demand Reebok drop Dijonai Carrington after brutal attack on Sophie Cunningham. Hold her accountable. I firmly support Reebok dropping Dijonai Carrington's.
One moment, 30 seconds of basketball. That's all it took to completely flip the trajectory of two careers moving in opposite directions. And what's wild is that both of these stories are happening at the exact same time in the exact same league. On one side of this narrative, you've got a player whose signature shoe sold out in under an hour and is now sitting on resale sites for more than double the retail price. People are lining up online, camping out on sneaker apps, doing whatever they can to get their hands on these shoes because the demand is that real. On the other side, you've got a player watching a multi-million-dollar brand deal reportedly fall apart in real time, watching her Threads account get flooded with criticism so intense that she had to go private, watching her name trend for all the wrong reasons. The absolutely insane part, both of these things happened because of the exact same play, the exact same week, and the exact same moment on the court. These two stories are connected at the hip, tied together by a single decision that changed everything. And here's what makes this worth actually paying attention to. It wasn't just about the basketball. It wasn't just about the physical play or the foul or the ejection. It was about what happened after. It was about how two different players responded to adversity in real time and how those responses led them down completely opposite paths.
But here it says, perfect. Good job, Reebok, for having a morals clause in her contract and enforcing it by pulling it. Carrington is a bully that the league apparently is protecting. Wake up, WNBA, before someone really gets hurt. You'll get sued because we Americans won't stand for this abuse.
One response led to momentum. The other led to a fallout that's still unfolding. The play itself was absolutely brutal, and if you watched it live, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Dijonai Carrington was on a fast break, moving down the court with purpose, and Sophie Cunningham was in her way. Now, what happens next is the kind of moment that makes even casual basketball fans wince because it's just vicious. It's the kind of foul where you don't need to be an expert to know something went wrong. Carrington threw a forearm directly at Cunningham's face and neck area. There was a wind-up, there was clear follow-through. Cunningham was in a vulnerable position, unable to really defend herself or brace for impact.
Dijonai Carrington is looking around the room like, oh my God, I've never been in this much fire. I mean, it's getting so bad that now her endorsements are potentially about to pull out on representing.
She drops her Crazy Energy colorway athlete-sponsored shoe. It's an Adidas shoe, and less than 1 hour online, it sells out in all sizes. She is very happy about that.
And when it connected, it drew blood. We're not talking about a minor contact. We're talking about visible blood on Cunningham's face. The officials didn't even hesitate. They didn't need to go back and review the play multiple times. They didn't need to discuss it with each other for an extended period. They just looked at what happened and immediately knew. Flagrant 2, automatic ejection. No debate, no discussion, just a straight call. That's how obvious it was. That's the kind of foul that's so clean-cut that there's really no argument to be made about it. The rules are the rules, and Carrington had violated them in about as clear a way as possible. Cunningham got up bleeding, absolutely furious, and the entire league watched it unfold in real time on national television. Cameras caught everything. Broadcasters were talking about it. Replay angles showed it from multiple perspectives, and everyone reached the same conclusion. That was a dirty play, that was a flagrant 2, and Carrington deserved to be ejected. You could feel the temperature of the moment shift in real time. The energy in the arena changed. The commentary changed.
Y'all see what happened when this young lady got ejected from a WNBA game the other day for a flagrant foul on Sophie Cunningham? Did y'all see that? She got ejected from the game. for that flagrant foul right there, and I'll be damned if that wasn't a flagrant 2. She mugged her. Damn near came across like decapitating her, for crying out loud. That was definitely a hard foul. Make no mistake about it, nobody can argue about it. You can say what you want. We know what we saw. No way around it. Dijonai Carrington foul was clearly unnecessary. It was a flagrant foul penalty 2. It was absolutely positively correct call. It was called the flagrant 2. That's a flagrant 2 every single damn time in the NBA and the...
Everything pivoted because of what just happened on the court. But here's where the story takes a turn that absolutely nobody was expecting. Carrington didn't just accept the ejection and move on like most players do in situations like this. She didn't go back to the locker room, sit with what happened, process it, think about the mistake she made. Instead, and this is the crucial part, seconds after getting escorted off the court while still in her uniform, while everything was still raw and heated, she pulled out her phone and posted 2 words on Threads. 2 words, not a sentence, not a paragraph of explanation. 2 words, and she tagged the Indiana Fever directly. White privilege. That's it, no context, no explanation, no additional details. Just that phrase, sitting there in the public timeline for the entire internet to interpret however they wanted. And given the timing, given who she just fouled, given whose team she was tagging, given the fact that she posted it literally moments after being ejected from the game, there was really only one way people were going to read it. They read it as an accusation. They interpreted it as a claim that the flagrant 2 call was made because of race. They saw it as her saying that the only reason she got ejected was because Sophie Cunningham is white and that the refs were protecting her. And once that interpretation took hold in the collective consciousness, once that narrative started spreading across social media,
a lot of people are, getting behind this thing, and Dijonai Carrington is on the brink of potentially losing millions of dollars with sponsorship. Here it says breaking thousands of people are calling Reebok to drop. This thing is everywhere, man. This thing is everywhere. So Dijonai Carrington, man, on the brink of losing it all. And you just did too much. A flagrant foul was enough, but the whole white privilege thing, nasty and uncalled.
Once people started screenshot it and sharing it and talking about it, the situation spiraled faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within minutes, the post was being discussed everywhere. Within hours, it was a full-blown controversy. Within a day, it was a national story. And the more people talked about it, the more the initial interpretation became cemented as what she must have meant. The thing is, within seconds of that post hitting the internet, the responses started flooding in. Fans were calling her out immediately. Other players were weighing in. Former athletes were starting to comment on it. The criticism was swift, and it was intense, and it was overwhelming. People were explaining exactly why the call had nothing to do with race. They were breaking down the rules of basketball and explaining that hard fouls like that get called across every combination of players in the league, regardless of the races involved. They were pointing out that you can't just hit someone in the head and draw blood and expect the refs not to call it. And then Manuel Ocho, the former NFL player turned broadcaster with a massive platform and massive credibility, went directly after her on his show. He didn't mince words. He broke down exactly why the call had nothing to do with race and everything to do with the objective rules of the game.
It's a flagrant foul, penalty 2. Since there's wind-up, impact, and follow-through, high potential for injury, players in a vulnerable position.
That's an obvious call. And anyone who has watched this league and any other prior flagrants would tell you as soon as they saw one replay of that was going to be a flagrant 2.
You could tell watching it live it was going to be a flagrant 2.
The flagrant was upgraded because Carrington hit Cunningham in the head and drew blood. That's it. That's the reason. Not race. Not bias. Not anything other than a clear violation of the rules. He pointed out that hard fouls like that get called constantly in this league, across every combination of players you can imagine, and none of them get labeled with language as heavy as white privilege. And then, he did something that really drove the point home. He called the post ignorant and asinine. Those are strong words. Those are the kinds of words that stick with you. But they're also words that matched exactly how a lot of people were already feeling watching this situation unfold in real time. The public consensus was forming, and it wasn't in Carrington's favor. What Carrington did next, is genuinely the moment where things started going downhill for her in ways that couldn't be recovered from easily. Instead of taking the criticism in stride, instead of just moving forward and letting the moment pass, she decided to fire back. She decided to engage. She decided to defend herself. Now, on the surface, that might seem reasonable. If someone is criticizing you publicly, sometimes you want to defend your position and clarify what you actually meant. But the way she handled this backtracking is what really made things worse instead of better. When Manuel Acho called her out on national television, when he used strong language like ignorant and asinine, when he broke down the rules of basketball and explained why the call was correct, Carrington responded. But her response wasn't a simple clarification. Her response wasn't just saying, "Hey, I didn't mean that the foul was white privilege. I meant something else." Her response was structured more like a lecture. She went back and said that she never claimed the foul assessment itself was white privilege. She said that people were making assumptions and that people needed to exercise their critical thinking skills. She mentioned that she went to one of the top universities specifically to educate herself on the subject of white privilege, and that she would never use that term without having proper evidence to substantiate it. And here's the problem with that response. It doesn't actually explain anything. It doesn't clarify what she did mean. It doesn't tell us why she posted those 2 words seconds after getting ejected while tagging the exact team of the player she just fouled. It doesn't answer the basic question of what was going through her head in that moment. What it does do is create the perception that she's deflecting instead of being direct. What it does do is make it seem like she's avoiding the actual question, and instead trying to reframe the entire conversation around her education and her understanding of critical thinking and the nuances of white privilege as a sociological term. When you get called out publicly, and your response is to lecture the person calling you out instead of just explaining your original point in plain, simple language, it reads a certain way to people. It reads as defensive. It reads as evasive. It reads like you're not actually trying to clarify anything, you're just trying to make the other person look bad by suggesting they don't understand the complexity of what you're trying to say. And that's exactly how the public interpreted it. That's how media figures interpreted it. That's how fans interpreted it. The conversation didn't shift in her favor. It actually got worse. The timeline matters here because it shows how the situation kept getting amplified instead of resolved. Carrington threw the foul. She got ejected. She posted the 2 words immediately. The criticism started coming in within minutes. Manuel Acho called her out on his broadcast. She responded with the lecture about critical thinking and university education. And then instead of things cooling down at that point, they actually intensified. The more she tried to defend herself, the more people felt like she was avoiding the actual issue. What made this even more damaging is that the original post still sits out there unresolved. To this day, Carrington hasn't actually explained in clear, simple terms what she meant when she posted white privilege seconds after getting ejected. That's the thing that people are the most frustrated about. It's not necessarily that she made a mistake. It's that when given the opportunity to clarify the mistake, she didn't actually do it. She explained what she didn't mean instead of explaining what she did mean. That's a crucial difference. Social media being the beast that it is, once a narrative gets established, it becomes almost impossible to change it. The story became, Carrington committed a dirty foul, got ejected, blamed it on white privilege, and then when called out, tried to lecture people about critical thinking instead of just owning the mistake. And once that became the story, everything else she did got filtered through that lens. She couldn't say anything that would change the narrative at that point. Within hours of all this happening, Carrington made a decision that showed just how intense things had gotten. She set her Threads account to private. She wasn't completely deleting anything or going fully silent, but she was essentially locking down the conversation. Reports from people who saw the comments before the account went private described being clowned online, with screen recordings showing wave after wave of criticism just stacking up in real time. We're not talking about a small pocket of angry fans who disagreed with her. We're talking about the overwhelming majority of the response. It was relentless. When a player has to hide from her own audience, when she feels the need to make her social media account private to escape the criticism, that tells you something important. That tells you the damage isn't limited to one bad news cycle that will blow over in a week. That tells you the damage is serious enough and ongoing enough that she felt she needed to step away from public interaction entirely. That's a pivotal moment in how this story evolved. That's the moment where it became clear that this wasn't just a sports controversy anymore. This was something bigger. While all of that was happening with Carrington, while she was setting her account to private and dealing with the fallout from her post, something completely different was unfolding on the other side of this narrative. Sophie Cunningham's story was taking a completely different trajectory. And to understand why, you have to understand what Cunningham had already been doing throughout this entire season leading up to this moment. Cunningham had been one of the most vocal defenders of Caitlin Clark this entire season. She'd been consistently calling out how the league and officials were handling the physical treatment that Clark gets on a nightly basis. Every time Clark got fouled hard, every time the refs missed a call, every time officials seemed to let physical play slide against her, Cunningham was there speaking up about it. She was publicly advocating for Clark. She was using her platform to push back against what she saw as unfair treatment. That made her a target for criticism from certain parts of the league, sure. Some people disagreed with her. Some players didn't appreciate her speaking so openly about these things. But what it also did was make her one of the most talked about and most marketable personalities in the WNBA right now. Here's the thing about being marketable in professional sports. It matters to the brands. It matters to the companies that are considering whether to sign you to an endorsement deal. They're not just looking at your statistics or your performance on the court. They're looking at your relevance. They're looking at whether people care about what you have to say. They're looking at whether you're part of conversations that matter. And Cunningham was definitely part of those conversations. She was actively shaping those conversations. Adidas clearly saw all of this coming. They saw the momentum that was building around Cunningham. They saw the narrative that was developing around her as an outspoken advocate for fairness in the league. They saw her positioning herself as someone who wasn't afraid to speak up about things that mattered. And they made a decision. They decided to capitalize on all of that by giving her a signature shoe. That's a significant move. That's a brand saying, we want you to be one of the faces of our product line. We want your name and your image attached to our shoes. The shoe that they dropped was called the Crazy Energy PE. It was positioned as a player-exclusive colorway, which means it was specifically designed for Cunningham, reflecting her personality and her style. The retail price was somewhere between $110 and $120, depending on which retailer you were buying from. So we're not talking about an outrageously expensive limited edition that only a handful of people could afford. We're talking about an accessible price point that regular fans could actually get to if they wanted to. That's important because it affects how many people are going to buy it. And here's where the story gets genuinely interesting from a business perspective. The shoe dropped just days before Carrington's entire social media situation was even happening. Cunningham's shoe arrived in the market at the exact moment when her relevance and her marketability were already at peak levels. Adidas had timed this perfectly, whether by accident or by design. The shoe hit the market, and almost immediately, something remarkable started happening. People started buying it. Like a lot of people. Within roughly 60 minutes of the release, most sizes were gone on Adidas's own website. We're not talking about by the end of the day. We're not talking about by the weekend. We're talking about an hour, 60 minutes. For a player-exclusive shoe from someone who is, by traditional standards, considered a role player and not a superstar, that is absolutely not normal. That is the kind of sellout speed that brands dream about when they sign a player. That is the kind of success metric that justifies an entire endorsement deal. Adidas got lucky, or they were really smart about their timing, or some combination of both. Whatever the reason, the shoe was gone from their primary sales channel in 1 hour. But it didn't stop there. The momentum kept building. Dick's Sporting Goods and Hibbett, other major retailers, they had extra stock available for people who missed the initial wave on Adidas.com, but even that stock disappeared fast. People were hunting for these shoes. They were checking multiple retailers. They were staying on top of restocks. The demand was clearly there, and it was clearly sustained. Then the resale market got involved. And this is where the story becomes genuinely remarkable from a cultural perspective. The pairs that were hitting resale sites like StockX and other sneaker marketplaces were starting to go for close to $270. Think about that for a second. A shoe that retailed for $110 to $120 was selling on the secondary market for more than double the original price. That's not normal for most player releases. That's the kind of resale inflation you usually see with limited drops from established superstars like Michael Jordan or LeBron James or Kanye West. You don't usually see it with a role player getting her first signature deal. But this wasn't just about fans buying out of loyalty to Cunningham. This was actual sneaker culture paying attention. This was collectors and resellers treating Cunningham's shoe the way they treat limited drops from massive names. This was the sneaker community saying, "This is worth more than what it's selling for retail." And Adidas was watching all of this happen in real time. They started reposting fan content on their own channels. They were pushing the shoe across every platform they had. They were leaning into the moment because they could see that this was turning into something bigger than just a regular shoe release. This was turning into a moment. As we step back and look at what was happening simultaneously on both sides of this story, the contrast becomes almost impossible to ignore. You had two players. You had two moments of adversity. You had two completely different ways of handling those moments. And you had two completely different outcomes as a result. On one side, you had Cunningham. She got hit in the face. She got a forearm directly to her face and neck area from another player. She bled. She was frustrated and angry and had every right to be upset about what just happened to her. But here's what she didn't do. She didn't rush to social media to post cryptic messages. She didn't tag anyone or make accusations. She didn't try to reframe what happened or explain away the moment. She handled herself with composure. She got up, she dealt with the ejection of the player who fouled her, and she moved forward. She let her game speak for itself. She let the moment be what it was without trying to add layers of interpretation or explanation to it. On the other side, you had Carrington. She committed a hard foul. She got ejected for it. That's a moment of adversity too, in its own way. It's an embarrassing moment. It's a moment where you made a mistake and you're facing immediate consequences for that mistake. But here's what she did differently. She immediately took to social media. She posted something that was open to interpretation. She made an accusation. And when people criticized her for that post, instead of simply clarifying what she meant, she doubled down. She lectured people. She explained what she didn't mean instead of explaining what she did mean. These are fundamentally different approaches to handling pressure in real time. These are fundamentally different philosophies about how to navigate a moment when the entire world is watching and judging. And those different philosophies led to completely different outcomes. Cunningham's approach led to a shoe that sold out in an hour. It led to resale value doubling. It led to sneaker culture treating her release like a major limited drop. It led to Adidas pushing her across every channel they had. It led to momentum building in her favor. It led to brand loyalty and consumer excitement. It led to the kind of commercial success that most athletes dream about. Carrington's approach led to her setting her Threads account to private. It led to reports describing her being clowned online. It led to waves of criticism that were so intense that she felt she needed to step away from public interaction. It led to national broadcasters using strong language to describe her actions. It led to a narrative forming around her as someone who couldn't handle adversity in a mature way. It led to people talking about accountability and responsibility and what it means to be a role model. And here's the thing that really matters when you sit with this. Both of these players were placed in high-pressure situations at basically the exact same moment. Both of them had to make decisions about how to respond. Both of them had the agency to choose their own path forward, but the choices they made led them in completely opposite directions. What's particularly interesting is that Cunningham didn't have to be reactive at all. She could have been upset. She could have vented on social media. She could have posted angry messages or accusatory statements. She had just been hit in the face, after all. She had just been involved in an incident that drew blood and got another player ejected. She had every emotional justification to be reactive and upset and to express that through social media. But she didn't. She chose restraint. Carrington, by contrast, was given the opportunity multiple times to be measured and thoughtful in her response. When she first felt the impulse to post something on Threads, she could have paused and thought about whether it was the right move. When she received criticism, she could have taken a moment to carefully consider what she actually meant before responding. When people called her out, she could have issued a simple, direct clarification. She had multiple opportunities to choose a different path. But at each of those decision points, she made a choice that kept the story alive and kept the controversy building. What makes this story genuinely worth paying attention to is not just that one player is winning and one player is losing. It's how directly the two outcomes are connected to the choices that were made in real time. The basketball moment itself is almost irrelevant at this point. The foul would have been forgotten by now. Flagrant fouls happen constantly in this league without turning into season-defining stories. It would have been a brief moment of controversy, maybe a discussion about physicality in the league, and then it would have moved on. But the post changed everything. The social media response changed everything. The refusal to simply own the mistake and move forward changed everything. Those were choices. Those were decisions made by a person with agency who could have chosen differently at any point in this process. And the outcomes we're seeing now are a direct result of those choices. It's a genuinely strange thing to sit with. Two careers moving in completely opposite directions because of the same 30 seconds of basketball. But really, they're moving in opposite directions not because of the basketball, but because of what happened after the basketball. They're moving in opposite directions because of choices made in the hours and days that followed that moment on the court. And that's the part of this story that actually matters. That's the part that tells you something about how adversity works, about how moments define careers, about how the decisions you make in the immediate aftermath of a crisis can be more important than the crisis itself. To really understand why Reebok would walk away from a deal worth potentially $50 million or more, you have to think like a brand. You have to put yourself in the position of a major company that just signed a player to be the face of one of your most important initiatives. A lot of people look at sponsorship deals from a player's perspective. They see the money and they think, why would they ever walk away from that? But brands have different priorities. Brands have different concerns. Brands are thinking about things that go way beyond the immediate financial transaction. Go back to April 2025 for a second. Reebok made a big announcement. They announced that Dijonai Carrington was going to be one of the faces of their basketball comeback. This was positioned as a multi-year deal. This was part of a larger strategy to rebuild Reebok's presence in women's basketball. Carrington wasn't just a random marketing hire. She was someone who had actually earned this platform through her play on the court. She was a real player with real talent. That's why the deal made sense from both sides. It wasn't just Reebok paying for a name. It was Reebok recognizing actual athletic talent and positioning that talent as the face of their brand relaunch. The deal came with what Reebok was planning to be an entire marketing campaign. They were going to do product launches featuring Carrington. They were going to create social media content around her. They were going to build entire initiatives positioning her as a brand ambassador for both performance apparel and lifestyle products. Reebok's whole basketball comeback strategy had Carrington baked into it. She was supposed to be one of the main pillars of this initiative. But here's where the business reality collides with the sports moment. Most brand endorsement deals at that level come with what's called a morality clause. This is standard language in professional athlete contracts. The morality clause essentially says that the brand has the right to walk away from the deal if the athlete's public conduct creates the kind of controversy that could damage the brand's reputation or association. It's not always used, but it exists in almost every major endorsement deal. The reason these clauses exist is straightforward. When you pay millions of dollars to have someone represent your brand, you're literally putting your reputation in their hands. Every time that person appears in public, every time they post on social media, every time they're in the news cycle, your brand name is right there with them. If they do something that creates massive controversy, that controversy gets attached to your brand whether you want it to or not. The morality clause is the safety valve. It's the way brands protect themselves from situations that spin out of control. Now think about what happened from a brand perspective. Carrington committed a hard foul. That's not ideal from a brand perspective, but it's also not uncommon in basketball. It's within the normal range of what happens in a physical sport. Teams and leagues handle that through suspensions and fines. It's a routine part of the game. No brand is going to have a problem with their athlete getting ejected for a hard foul. That happens. But then Carrington posted "white privilege" on Threads seconds after getting ejected. That post tagged the Indiana Fever directly. That post was immediately interpreted as making a racial accusation about the call. And once that interpretation took hold, it became a national story. It became the kind of headline that gets discussed on national broadcasts. It became the kind of moment that attracts controversy and debate and criticism and think pieces. It became the kind of story that keeps generating new cycles of coverage as people continue to discuss it. From a brand perspective, Reebok is now in a situation where every time they do anything with Carrington, the story gets filtered through this controversy. Every piece of marketing content they create has to exist in the shadow of what happened. Every social media post about her is going to have comments underneath it referencing the incident. Every interview she does is going to include questions about this moment. The company that they just signed to be the face of their basketball comeback is now primarily associated with a racial controversy in sports. Put yourself in the position of a Reebok executive. You just committed millions of dollars to a campaign featuring this athlete. You've got marketing initiatives planned. You've got product launches scheduled. You've got social media content queued up. And now every single piece of that content exists in the context of this controversy. Every time someone sees Carrington's face representing your brand, they're also thinking about the foul, the post, the criticism, the backlash. That's not the brand association you were hoping for when you signed this deal. What makes it even worse from a brand perspective is that Carrington didn't immediately clarify or resolve the situation. If she had issued a simple statement within hours of the post going live, the story could have died down. The brand could have weathered the storm and moved forward. But she didn't do that. She posted a lecture about critical thinking. She engaged in a back and forth with Manuel Acho. She kept the story alive by continuing to defend her original post instead of just moving past it. Every day the story stayed in the news cycle was another day that Reebok's name was attached to it. The business calculation becomes pretty straightforward at that point. Keeping Carrington as the face of Reebok's basketball rebuild means that every future campaign, every future product launch, every future marketing initiative gets read through the lens of this controversy. It means that instead of the conversation being about the product or the athlete's performance or the brand itself, the conversation is about the racial controversy. For a brand in rebuilding mode that's trying to establish itself in women's basketball, that's simply not a trade they can afford to make. There's also a signal that Reebok is sending by walking away, whether they intend to or not. By invoking the morality clause and ending the deal, Reebok is essentially saying that they take these kinds of controversies seriously. They're saying that they have standards for the people who represent their brand. They're saying that conduct matters. And in a cultural moment where people are increasingly paying attention to what brands stand for and who they choose to represent them, that signal can actually be valuable. When Carrington decided to respond to the criticism, when she made the choice to fire back at Manuel Acho and the other people who were calling her out, she had an opportunity. It was a genuine opportunity to reset the entire narrative. She could have issued a statement that was clear and direct. She could have explained exactly what she meant when she posted those two words. She could have provided context that the critics were missing. She could have fundamentally changed how people were interpreting the situation. But the response she actually gave didn't do any of those things. Instead of providing clarity, it created more confusion. Instead of resolving the issue, it amplified it. Instead of making people feel like they understood her intention, it made them feel like she was avoiding the actual question. Here's the exact problem with what happened. When Manuel Acho and others were criticizing her, they were essentially asking a simple question. Why did you post "white privilege" seconds after getting ejected? It's a straightforward question. It's the kind of question that has a straightforward answer. You can explain what was going through your head in that moment. You can explain what you meant by those two words. You can clarify whether you were making an accusation about the call itself or about something else. It's answerable. It's explainable. But Carrington's response didn't actually answer the question. Instead, she responded by saying that she never claimed the foul assessment itself was white privilege. She said that people were making assumptions. She said that people needed to exercise their critical thinking skills. She said that she attended one of the top universities and went to school specifically to educate herself on this exact subject, and would never use that term as a rhetorical weapon without having proper evidence to substantiate it. So, in her face to Manuel Acho. Now step back from this for a second. Think about what just happened. Someone asked her to clarify what she meant. She responded by explaining what she didn't mean. That's not the same thing. Explaining what you didn't mean does not clarify what you did mean. If someone asks you, "Why did you do X?" and you respond by saying, "I didn't mean to do Y," that doesn't actually answer the original question. It just moves the conversation into a different territory. What's worse is that by responding with a lecture about critical thinking and university education, Carrington created the perception that she was being defensive. It created the perception that she was trying to make the other person look bad rather than actually answering the question. When you get called out, and your response is to lecture the person calling you out about what they should be thinking or understanding, it reads as evasive. It reads as deflection. It reads like you're avoiding the actual issue. And here's the thing, whether that was intentional or not doesn't really matter at that point. The perception was set. People interpreted the response the way they did. And once that interpretation took hold, it was incredibly difficult to change. The conversation shifted from, "What did she mean by white privilege?" to, "Why is she refusing to just answer the question?" And that second conversation is significantly worse for her, because it's about character and accountability, rather than just about a misunderstanding that could be cleared up. Fair or not, that's how the public interpreted what happened. That's how media figures interpreted it. That's how fans interpreted it. And once a narrative gets established in that way, once people form that interpretation of events, it's incredibly hard to walk it back. You could spend weeks trying to clarify what you meant, and people would still remember that original perception. What's particularly frustrating about this from an outsider's perspective is that it was entirely avoidable. There was a moment where Carrington could have just been direct. She could have posted a statement within hours of the original controversy that said something like, "I want to clarify what I meant. I posted in anger immediately after being ejected, and I realize it came across in a way I didn't intend. I was frustrated about the moment, and I should have taken time to think before posting." That would have been enough. That would have addressed the issue. That would have shown accountability and willingness to own the mistake. Instead, what happened was the opposite. Instead of taking that approach, she issued a response that seemed to be defending the original post rather than acknowledging that it was unclear or poorly timed or needed clarification. She issued a response that lectured the people criticizing her rather than addressing their actual concerns. She issued a response that seemed to be saying, "You're the ones who are wrong for misinterpreting what I said," rather than saying, "I see how that came across, and I take responsibility for that." And then the back and forths continued. Days went by, the story kept being rehashed. New people got involved in the criticism. More media figures weighed in. Every day that went by without a clear, direct clarification was another day that the original narrative became more cemented. Every time she posted a response or engaged in a debate about what she meant, she was keeping the story alive when she could have been letting it die down. This is actually a pretty common pattern when people get criticized on social media. Instead of stepping back and making one clear statement that addresses the criticism directly, they engage in ongoing arguments. They keep posting responses. They keep defending their position. And all of that just keeps the controversy alive longer than it would have naturally lasted. The coverage keeps going. The story keeps being discussed. People keep forming opinions. And each of those cycles makes it harder to recover from. The sad part is that the recovery path was available to her at every step of this process. She could have taken it at any point, and things would have turned out differently. But instead, she chose to engage, to defend, to lecture, and to argue. Those choices had consequences. Those choices turned a moment that could have been forgotten into a moment that defined her brand value and her public perception. When you step back and look at how these two players handled adversity in the immediate aftermath of the basketball moment, the comparison becomes genuinely unavoidable. They were put in situations that, on the surface, might seem pretty different. One player got fouled. One player committed the foul. One player got hit in the face. One player got ejected. But at a deeper level, both of them faced a moment of adversity. Both of them faced a moment where they were in the spotlight and the entire world was watching how they were going to respond. Cunningham's approach was fundamentally about restraint. She got hit. She bled. She was ejected from the game because of what happened to her. She had every right to be upset. She had every right to be angry. She had every right to go on social media and vent about what happened to her. And she had every right to try to reframe the moment or explain the situation. But she didn't do any of those things. Instead, she handled herself with composure. She moved forward. She let her game speak for itself in the days and weeks that followed. The interesting thing about Cunningham's approach is that it created a narrative without her having to do anything. Because she didn't make excuses, because she didn't blame anything or anyone for what happened, because she just dealt with the moment and moved forward, people started talking about her composure. People started talking about her character. People started talking about what it says about a person that they can get hit like that and still keep their head. And that narrative, the narrative of a player with poise and character, is the exact narrative that makes someone marketable to brands. Adidas was watching all of this happen. They saw Cunningham get hit. They saw her composure in the aftermath. They saw how she was being discussed and portrayed. And then they made the decision to push forward with her shoe release. They saw the momentum that was building around her as a person, not just as a player. And that momentum is what made the shoe successful. That's what made people want to buy it. That's what made it sell out in an hour. It wasn't just about basketball skill. It was about the entire package: the player, the narrative, the cultural moment, the messaging. Carrington's approach was fundamentally different. Where Cunningham showed restraint, Carrington was reactive. Where Cunningham let the moment be what it was, Carrington tried to reframe it. Where Cunningham moved forward, Carrington stayed stuck in the immediate aftermath, trying to defend and explain and convince people that they were misunderstanding her. Now, it's easy to criticize Carrington for this approach, but it's also worth acknowledging that it came from a real place. She had just been ejected. She had just made a mistake that cost her team and cost her. She was probably frustrated and angry and embarrassed. Those are legitimate emotions. The mistake wasn't in feeling those emotions. The mistake was in channeling those emotions directly into a social media post without pausing to think about how it would be interpreted. But here's the thing about being a public figure in 2025. You don't get a pass on those kinds of reactions anymore. You don't get to post in anger and expect people to understand and forgive you. You don't get to say whatever you want in the heat of the moment and expect that to be okay. Because everything is permanent, everything is recorded, everything is screenshot, everything is immediately broadcast to millions of people. The contrast between these two players isn't really about who made the bigger mistake. Carrington's mistake was making a hard foul. Cunningham's mistake was getting hit by that hard foul, which isn't really her mistake at all. The contrast is about how they handled the moment that came after the basketball moment itself. Cunningham handled the aftermath in a way that elevated her. She moved forward. She let people see her character through her actions rather than through her words. She didn't try to control the narrative or defend herself or explain away what happened. She just existed in the moment and let people draw their own conclusions. And the conclusion people drew was that she's composed and classy and the kind of person you want representing your brand. Carrington handled the aftermath in a way that created a problem where there wasn't necessarily one. She took a moment that would have naturally passed within days and turned it into an ongoing controversy. She took a mistake that everyone could understand, you get frustrated after a hard ejection, and turned it into a question about judgment and accountability and character. The really tragic part of this comparison is that both of these outcomes were possible for Carrington. She could have chosen the path that Cunningham chose. She could have posted nothing and just moved forward. She could have let the moment pass. She could have rebuilt her brand through her play and her conduct in the weeks and months following the incident. She had that path available to her. It was there. Instead, she chose a different path. She chose to engage. She chose to defend. She chose to explain and lecture and argue about what she meant. And those choices, made in real time with a social media account and an audience watching, led her down a completely different road. They led to the situation where a potentially $50 million deal is reportedly falling apart. This is the part that makes the story genuinely worth thinking about beyond just the sports angle. This is about how moments define people. This is about how the decisions we make in the immediate aftermath of something difficult can matter more than the difficult thing itself. This is about composure and judgment, and the ability to step back from a moment rather than immediately trying to control how it's being perceived. Here's the important thing to understand about this entire situation: it's not over. This isn't a closed narrative where we can draw final conclusions. Both Carrington and Cunningham are still playing. Both of their careers are still unfolding. Both of their stories are still being written. What we're looking at right now is a snapshot of a moment in time, not a definitive ending. That matters because it means there's actually a path forward for Carrington if she chooses to take it. Athletes have recovered from worse public relations disasters than this one. There are examples throughout sports history of players who made significant mistakes, who damaged their brand value, who faced serious professional consequences, and who came back from it. It's not easy. It requires genuine work and genuine accountability, but it's possible. The question is whether Carrington is willing to take that path. Because recovery doesn't happen through more posts or more explanations or more attempts to reframe the narrative. Recovery happens through a combination of accountability and time and demonstrated change. It happens when a player acknowledges that they made a mistake, owns it without qualification or lecture, and then moves forward in a way that proves they've learned something from the experience. Right now, Carrington is still in the phase where the story is stuck on the backtracking. The narrative is still about what she said and what she meant and whether she was trying to deflect. That needs to change. That needs to become a closed chapter. And the only way that becomes a closed chapter is if she provides a clear, direct statement that addresses the issue without trying to explain it away or defend it or lecture people about critical thinking. It would look something like this: I made a mistake. I posted something in anger immediately after being ejected, and it was poorly conceived and poorly timed. I didn't think about how it would be interpreted. I take responsibility for that. I'm not going to try to explain what I meant or reframe what I said. I'm just going to acknowledge that it was a mistake and move forward. That kind of statement would do more to reset the narrative than anything else could, because it doesn't try to defend the original post. It doesn't try to explain it away. It doesn't lecture anyone about critical thinking or the nuances of sociological concepts. It just owns the mistake. And there's something about taking real accountability like that which actually does change how people perceive the situation. It doesn't fix everything, but it moves things in a different direction. As for the Reebok deal, whether it actually gets terminated or whether the two parties find a way to continue the relationship, that's going to be determined by business conversations that we're not going to be privy to. But from a business perspective, it makes sense why they'd be looking for an exit. The story needs to die down first before any brand would feel comfortable continuing to associate themselves with Carrington as their primary basketball ambassador. Cunningham, on the other hand, is in a completely different position. Her trajectory is continuing upward. Her shoe is still selling. The demand for her product is still there. The brand momentum is still building. From a commercial perspective, she's exactly where she wants to be. But she's also got a responsibility that comes with that. She's in a position of visibility and influence now. Millions of people are going to be watching her, buying her products, following her social media. She's going to have to maintain the composure and the character that got her to this position in the first place. The contrast between these two trajectories is genuinely instructive. It's instructive about how moments define careers. It's instructive about how the decisions we make immediately after something difficult can matter more than the difficult thing itself. It's instructive about the importance of restraint and composure when you're in the spotlight. Here's what makes this story actually worth sitting with beyond just the entertainment value of watching one player go up and one player go down. What makes this story worth thinking about is that it demonstrates something fundamental about how public figures navigate adversity in the modern age. The rules are different than they used to be. The stakes are different. Everything is permanent. Everything is recorded. And the decisions you make in the heat of the moment can have consequences that last far longer than the moment itself. For Carrington, the path forward exists. It's going to require genuine accountability and genuine growth and genuine time for people to see that she's learned something from this experience. It's going to require restraint and composure in future moments when she feels the impulse to defend herself or explain herself or go on social media to post something that might generate controversy. It's going to require her to let her game and her conduct speak for themselves rather than trying to control the narrative through her words. For Cunningham, the challenge is going to be maintaining the momentum. It's easy to go up quickly. It's harder to sustain that elevation. She's going to have to keep making smart decisions. She's going to have to keep showing the composure and character that got her here. And she's going to have to use the platform that she's built to continue making noise about the things that matter to her, like the treatment of Caitlin Clark and women's basketball more broadly. The next few weeks and months are going to be genuinely important for both of their careers. The stories aren't finished being written. But right now, as this moment unfolds in real time, one player is trending in the right direction and one player is not. And that direction was determined not by basketball skill or talent or play on the court. It was determined by choices made in the hours and days after a moment of adversity. It was determined by how two different people chose to respond when the pressure was on and the entire world was watching. And that's the part of this story that actually matters. This entire situation comes down to one fundamental truth. Nobody's career is destroyed by a single mistake. A hard foul happens. An ejection happens. Those are moments that every athlete faces at some point. The real career damage comes from how you respond when those moments happen. It comes from the choices you make in the immediate aftermath. It comes from whether you take accountability or whether you try to defend yourself. It comes from whether you let the moment pass or whether you keep it alive through ongoing arguments and explanations. Carrington still has time to rebuild. She's still a young player with talent and a future in this league. But rebuilding her brand value is going to require her to step back from the narrative she's been creating and actually address the core issue, which is that she posted something in anger and then tried to defend it instead of owning it. If she can do that, if she can make a clear statement that takes genuine accountability without qualification or lecture, then the conversation can move forward. Cunningham's momentum is real, but it's also fragile. She needs to maintain the composure and character that got her here. She needs to continue using her platform for the things that matter while staying out of unnecessary drama. She needs to let her success speak for itself. Both of these stories are still being written, but right now, only one of them is moving in the right direction.